Well, hey, I'm going to jump right in today, and I have a lot to say, and so I'm going to talk faster than usual, so hopefully you guys can keep up today. But we're on a journey, summer-long journey through the book of Proverbs, and we're on a pursuit to gain wisdom. So if you have a hard copy of the scriptures, the Bible, you opened it up, you'll probably be in Psalms, just turn to the right, and you'll end up in Proverbs, okay? So that's where we're going to hang out today. But a few weeks ago, I got invited to speak to a group of people who are preparing for summer camp connected to our foster care ministry and Hope 1312. And the director gives me the name of the area about 30 minutes north of here that she's calling Honey Creek Camp, okay? So I looked this up on maps, and I don't see anything specifically by that name, but I have a pretty good idea based on everything she's told me, kind of like the general location, okay? And so I drive up there on a Saturday afternoon, and I'm out in the middle of nowhere, right? And I know that I'm getting closer to water, and I'm driving down this gravel road that it dead ends. And I can turn left or I can turn right, okay? And so I don't exactly know which way I'm going. And so I see a sign, even though it's not exactly the name of the place that she told me, it's very similar, okay? So I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna turn right here. I see some buildings, and I start down that road, and it's a gravel road. I go past several buildings, and then ahead on the left, I see a parking lot that has about 20 cars in it, and I'm like, well, clearly this is the place I should be. So pull into that parking lot, and as I'm walking towards the building, okay, before I get to the steps, some people start walking out of the building, okay? And it's about 20 people, and they're paired up by bridesmaid and groomsmen, okay? And they're walking out there, and it's pretty obvious I'm at a wedding, okay? And so there's a crowd of people who are starting to form, okay? And they're making a line, and they're cheering, they're celebrating, they're throwing confetti, and I'm starting to think maybe this isn't the training for the summer camp after all, okay? So I'm wearing a t-shirt, I have on a pair of shorts and some flip-flops, a pair of rainbows, okay? And so before the bride gets ready to make her big appearance, I jump back into my car as quietly as you can on crushed gravel. I'm trying to sneak out of this place, okay? So I head across to the other side of the road, and I go that way, and sure enough, I find the place that I'm supposed to be. Even though it's not named, it's completely unmarked, and I tell you that story only to tell you this, that it holds true every single time, okay? Is that every road leads somewhere. Make sense? Every road leads somewhere, and not every road actually leads you to the place that you want to go. And here's the amazing thing, is that if you don't like the road that you're on, you can stop and turn around and get back on a different road so that you don't actually crash someone's wedding. Are you with me? And that is the message of the book of Proverbs. And what we learned last week, and will be uncovering every week as we go forward, is that in a similar way, with every decision that you and I make, we are walking down a path. And right now, you're walking down a financial path, you're walking down a relationship path, you're walking down a friendship path, we're walking down a path as we relate to food and alcohol and work and rest, and we're walking down a path in our sexuality. And while you could find the word way, path, or road used over 100 times in the book of Proverbs, okay, it essentially comes down to there are only two roads that you can walk on. Right, two deals essentially that are on the table, and those are the path of wisdom and the path of folly. The amazing thing that Proverbs does for us is that it actually tells us ahead of time how all of our decisions are actually going to turn out. In other words, if you follow the path of wisdom, it's going to lead you here. If you follow the path of folly, it's going to lead you here. And then he steps back essentially to say, okay, do you want that result, or are you more interested in this result? The path of wisdom will lead you down a good road that's full of peaceful things and a better life, and the path of folly will lead you down a hard road that's full of ruin and shame. And last week we started talking all about the path of wisdom, and I said, hey, let's get a working definition as we go forward to essentially say this. The wisdom is knowing, okay, that's first off, how to live, and then the action side, skillfully in God's world. Right? Wisdom is knowing how to live skillfully in God's world. Yes, you need to have a knowledge about how things actually work in the world, but knowledge is not enough. You need to take what you know and actually apply it to your life in God's world. And so the wisdom, right, that God is offering to us is available to absolutely anyone. And then what we looked at last week is to say this ability to gain knowledge and skill, right, to be able to choose good paths, it all begins with a trust in the Lord. And we hung out in chapter 1, verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and discipline, right? Fear meaning I am believing that God knows more than I do, that he actually knows what's best for me, so I'm not afraid of him. I actually have some awe and respect for him. And so very quickly we said that to walk on the path of wisdom requires that I humble myself and actually admit that maybe I don't know it all, to have a deep desire for knowledge and skill, and then to ask for it. So that's all for free, okay, to refresh your memories from last week. Today we're going to talk about the path of folly. Because if you can't be encouraged to walk down the path of wisdom, you will likely be enticed to walk down the path of folly. And when you start reading, in verse 8, and then going for several chapters, you'll see Solomon, who is writing to his son, essentially with this message. Hey, there are a ton of other voices calling you to go in another direction, right? Hey, you're about to step out into the world and start living your life, and there are people who are going to try to get you to go down a different path. Here's the way it says in chapter 1, verse 10, my son, if sinners entice you. Now, sinners in this case should be understood as anyone who does not, verse 7, fear the Lord. If they entice you, don't be persuaded. You'll actually read that it's a father and a mother who are saying to their son, listen, there are people who are calling you to actually ignore God's truth and to go with your natural inclination, right? Going to be to listen to them and follow those voices. And they're going to say, come on, let's hang out. Let's go cause some harmless fun. Let's do these things together. And they're going to appeal to a sense of belonging. By the way, there is something inside of each of us that makes us want to run towards things that actually hurt and harm us rather than to move towards things that help and heal us. Like by nature, right? We're really bad sometimes at knowing the difference. Now, I'm not going to choose to read all of the details about the message that follows. It's my personal belief that what Solomon's trying to do here is to exaggerate the path that he's being invited to. In other words, if you do read ahead, you should at least think about it as heavily concentrated picture, okay, of what the foolish path looks like. And I think that it's really less about the specifics of what's going to happen on that path, and it's really more about the destination, where the punchline is, hey, that road ends bad every single time. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of adrenaline and excitement on this path, right? There's acceptance of others on the path. It seems fun. There's money. There's power to be had. But I jump right down to verse 15 as they plead with him, hey, my son, don't travel that road with them. Don't even set foot on their path. And you see him like pleading with his son to say, listen, please, you don't have to go. Like, you don't have to do that, right? You don't have to join in. You don't have to travel all the same roads that everybody else is traveling. Please, don't even start down that path. Because when you head down the path of folly, you are declaring yourself to be the leader and in control, and you will inevitably push God and his wisdom aside. And the very thing that you thought was going to lead you to freedom was really a trap. He says, think about it this way in verse 17. He says, it's useless to spread a net where any bird can see it. And I think this works with most animal in the kingdom. I mean, I've tried to catch mice before anybody else. I've tried to catch bats inside the house. I've tried to, snakes. We don't catch snakes, by the way. We help them graduate to a new level. I've tried to catch my cats, right? And I don't know really how sharp birds are, but they seem to have enough capacity that if you set a trap while they are watching you actually set that trap, that they will likely see that bait and they will say to themselves, that looks really good, but I know that when I go for it, it's really a trick and I'm going to get caught and I'm going to end up on someone's dinner table. It's not going to end well. I'm out of here. He says, but what you've done is set an ambush to kill yourself. You're attacking your own life. In other words, on the path of folly, you're actually setting yourself up that if you don't have the ability or the skill or the wisdom to look ahead somewhere down the road and actually see what's coming at you, or if you blindly follow people who are foolish, he says, look, it'll cost you. And it'll cost you money, it'll cost you your hopes and your dreams, it'll cost you years of your life, it'll cost you relationships, maybe even your own life. He says, look, you're being set up And you're the one that set yourself up, like you did it to yourself. He says, such are the paths of all who make profit dishonestly. Now, I think you could use any example from the path of folly. Here's the punchline every time. It takes the lives of those who receive it. In other words, if you disregard the warnings and walk that road, you're about to be lured down the path of folly. Because when you go after what you want, right, without thinking about the potential consequences, it will send you down a road that ends far, far away from where you wanted to be. I won't even ask for a show of hands, and this is not a terrible thing. I was there last year, but you've ever been to Vegas before, right? And maybe you've seen the sign, or you know the tagline, and some of us have not only seen it, we actually believed it, right? This mantra of false security, that what happens in Vegas stays where? There you go. It is this mindset that wants to get you to believe that what you're about to do will likely greatly disappoint the people closest to you and possibly get you fired. So come here and you won't get caught, right? I can do this and nothing bad will happen. If you're taking notes or you're like, you know what, I should remember something today, here's what you should remember. What defines someone on the path of folly is the refusal to acknowledge the connection between my choices and the consequences. Now, here's the amazing thing about the book of Proverbs, because even as someone is walking down the path of folly, wisdom is still calling out, trying to get our attention, saying, listen, don't forget, there's another road that you could walk on. The voice of wisdom shows up as a person, a female. Verse 20, wisdom calls out in the street. She makes her voice heard in the public squares. She cries out above the commotion, speaks at the entrance of the city gates. And what gets highlighted here really is wisdom, or what would we consider the voice of God in our life, being vocal and visible. Right, you hear it in the streets, in the market, the intersections, at the city gate. In other words, the town square, right? The center of civic life where there's business and commerce and government. You can't miss him, right? Calling to everyone in every place, available to absolutely anyone who will stop for a second and listen. I'm having lunch across the street 2 weeks ago, and I noticed that they are playing contemporary worship music throughout the restaurant, okay? And I've built a pretty good relationship with one of the waitresses over there, okay? The very first time, you guys, maybe if you were here last year on Easter, I told this story, and I said, I just told her from the very beginning, I'm a pastor, and she goes, where? I said, the church across the street. She says, there's a church across the street? I bring her over to the window. I say, look over there. Oh yeah, there's a church over there. So we've been building this relationship for the last year. And I'm pretty sure that she didn't exactly know what they were playing, okay? And so I say, hey, do you like the music that y'all have playing? And she says, yes, I love it. And so I see my opportunity. I say, well, you know what? We play that music every week across the street. Well, she's not interested yet, okay? But every single day, God's wisdom is calling out to her. And you can ignore it if you want to, but you can't say, you know, I didn't hear that or I didn't see that. You can say, I think I actually missed that, but you can't say it wasn't there or available. Wisdom keeps calling out to people on the path of folly. And then what you see is there are actually 3 different types of people that Solomon describes on this path. He says it this way in 22. He says, how long, here's the first one, inexperienced ones, will you love ignorance? How long will you 2 mockers enjoy mocking? And you, number 3, fools hate knowledge. First, he calls them the inexperienced ones, or some Bibles translate it as the simple-minded. And this is amazing because it comes from the root word for open. I mean, these people are literally open to believing anything and everything. They never stop to think about good decisions, let alone best decisions or wise decisions. They actually like not knowing more than the effort that is required to pursue knowledge, right? They believe anything, examine absolutely nothing. They might be what we call gullible, okay? They're unreliable. They give up easy. They go with the flow, and they just kind of waver back and forth because they could change and actually learn, or they could graduate to a full-blown fool. Inexperienced ones, okay, they don't know what they don't know. And they look at the foolish path and they go, you know what? I didn't even know there were bad roads. Two, he calls the mockers. These are cynical, advanced fools, okay? They just outright, out loud resist wisdom. They think they know everything. They look at things that are important and they laugh at them, right? They would never accept correction. You're not the boss of me. Their main trait's opinionated. They're wise in their own eyes. No show of hands, no elbowing anybody, but you know people like this, right? They look at the path of wisdom and they say, I don't even want that to be true. Don't tell me what to do. You're not the judge of me. They're not on the path of folly by accident. It wasn't just a series of bad decisions that landed them there. It's their plan all along. And they make fun of the idea that there is such a thing as a bad road. Okay, these are the mockers. Third group are the fools, he says, which is a really big category of people who just refuse to even think about their choices and their consequences. They just lack a desire for any kind of spiritual wisdom. They don't listen, always have an excuse. Nothing is actually their fault. The only voice they actually care to hear is their own, and they might even know in their mind where that decision is going to lead them. They could think it's actually a really bad idea. They just refuse to even really think about it. They don't even want to know where that path takes them. So, inexperienced ones, right? They don't think about what they're doing. Mockers belittle thinking altogether, and fools refuse to think about what they're doing. And regardless of whether one describes you or even maybe a part of it, or you know someone like that, you're on the path of folly when you don't desire knowledge or, don't apply that knowledge to your life. So give me your full attention for this next two sentences. It is equally foolish, to know God's truth, like what to do, and not apply it, as it is to do something in your life that's completely opposed to what God says is right, true, and best. Both will land you on the path of folly. Solomon, in his, as a courtesy, he fast forwards the tape and he tells us how it's all going to end in 29. He says, because they hated knowledge and they didn't choose the fear of the Lord, weren't interested in my counsel, rejected all of my correction, they will eat the fruit of their way. They'll be glutted with their own schemes. For the apostasy, or the refusal to listen, apostasy of the inexperienced will kill them. The complacency of fools will destroy them. And maybe you did it intentionally, right? Maybe you didn't know what you were doing at the time. Maybe you just didn't think about it. Maybe you said, you know what, I don't see the big deal. I'm really not hurting anyone. Ignoring wisdom never works out well. And Solomon says, really, that every decision you make, if I walk the path of wisdom, there is a reward there. But when I walk the path of folly, there is a consequence. We're always reaping the consequences of our decisions. Now, there might be a few of us who go, it's actually working out for me so far. And I would say maybe that's what it looks, but let me just tell you the truth, that the path of folly is undefeated, It's just undefeated. And then maybe there's some of us who say, you know what? I actually learned that the hard way. Because think back, all right? Let's do an experiment here. You think back to a really hard time in your life where you put yourself in a bad decision or put yourself in a bad situation with your decision, Or you made a series of decisions that actually put you on a path that now we're looking back going, I really didn't want to travel that road. You got that one in your mind? Would it have saved you, Would it have saved you time and money and pain and relationships and years if there was a truth you had known about that? Or, equally important, would it have saved you time, money, pain, relationships, and years if there was an action you would have taken based on that truth? Let me give you a couple of examples. Think about money, Some of us have spent more than we have made for several years, right? And now we're in a really tough spot financially. Some of us are struggling. We can't pay all of our bills. It feels at times like we can't actually breathe, right? Would it have helped you to know, that Proverbs teaches us that the borrower becomes a servant to the lender, or would it have actually helped you to make a decision about money based on that truth? Make sense? Think about your friends, Some of us have some people that we've invited into our life, and they're fun, and we have a good time with them, and we actually enjoy similar things, but they have an influence over us, okay? And we find ourselves making some bad decisions when we're together. Would it have helped you to know, okay, that Proverbs teaches when we walk with wise people, we become wise. When we walk with foolish people, we drift towards foolishness? Or would it have helped you to actually choose friends based on that truth? Let me give you one more. Think about sexuality. Some of us took a carefree approach to this in our life, and we went with whatever we felt like, sometimes with whoever we felt like, and in the name of fun or desire or need or whatever, self kind of became the most important number one agenda. Would it have helped you to know, okay, that Proverbs teaches, hey, you should enjoy this with your wife or your husband. You should drink from your own cisterns or wells. Or the Proverbs talks about, hey, you're playing with fire and you're going to get burned. Or would it have actually helped you more to actually make decisions in your singleness or marriage based on those truths? This isn't church talk, by the way. This isn't me going, come on, y'all, we can do better. Let's do this, you know. We're talking about decisions here that actually affect destinies, right? Choices that you make that affect a whole lot of other people besides yourselves. And for a lot of us, those choices were what we wanted in the moment, right? But now that we're living out the results of those decisions, it tastes like really rotten fruit. That's what Solomon's saying. Now, when I wrote the message this week and I got to this point, I was like, well, this is really not very encouraging. Y'all are going to go, I'm so glad I came today. Like, what else do you have, right? Do you have anything positive or hopeful to share? Well, yes, I do. I have to go back to verse 23, and I'm going to mash it up with verse 33, okay, if that makes sense. This is what it says. If you respond to my warning, in other words, hey, whatever point in your life where you got off of the wise path and onto the foolish path, go back there, okay, stop and change course. He says, then I will pour out my spirit on you and teach you my words. Remember, wisdom's everywhere, right? If you want it. And here's what wisdom does. He says, whoever listens to me will live securely and be undisturbed by the dread of danger. That sounds like a good end, doesn't it? In other words, if you understand it and you walk on it, you can have the life that you want. But you have to recognize, okay, the destruction of the path that you're currently walking on, turn from it, listen to wisdom, and then start walking on that path, okay? So buckle up for a minute, all right? So some of us are already, when we leave here today, we already know what we're going to do. Concentrate on that word. We already know what we're going to do in our life. Okay, how we're going to live and what decisions we're going to make and what our next move is and how we're going to respond in a given situation. And we don't really care or want to know what the truth is. And then some of us already know, okay, that's the important word here. We already know what the truth is and what God has to say about certain issues and decisions and directions, but we're not going to do it, or we disagree with it, or we just simply aren't going to even try to practice it. So hang with me. So there are times when God says something, right, or the scriptures teach something, and it bumps into what our culture is telling us. God says, hey, do this or don't do that, and it crashes into what we want to be true or what we want to be different about anything, love and finances and family and sexuality, and we go, okay, I don't believe you, or I don't agree with you, or I don't even understand how that right there is better than this. And some of us have learned or are learning the hard way that just because we don't believe it or choose not to do it doesn't mean it isn't true. Or if it's even a better way to live. Both are equally dangerous. You can say, I don't believe that, or you can say, I don't want to do that. Proverbs backs away from the whole thing and says, okay, you get to choose that. But here's where you're headed. Okay, difficulty is going to come into your life. Things are going to get tough. Something's going to happen, and your life won't be able to stand up under it, and you will, in Jesus' words, come crashing down. Why? Either you didn't know the truth or have a desire for knowledge, or you didn't act on the truth and put it into skillful practice. See, wise people are people who have a foundation that we can stand on in the midst of trouble. And we're people who both know, okay, we have a knowledge of truth and we're putting it into practice in our life. Okay, we're applying it skillfully. So you take the path of wisdom and you lay it alongside of the path of folly. If you go down the path of foolishness, it's going to lead to ruin and shame every single time. Go down the path of wisdom and it's going to lead to peace and a better life every single time. So here's the little bit of good news, okay, before we wrap it all up. If you don't like the path that you're currently headed on, Proverbs says you can change paths. If you look back on some decisions you made and you go, man, I took that path and it led me here and it tastes like bitter, rotten fruit. What Proverbs says is, okay, you can actually stop and change paths. Or you can get back on the path of wisdom. Because some of us had a lot of access in our life. We had the privilege to know a lot of truth in our life to this point. And you heard a lot of it growing up, right? You heard it from your parents, you heard it from a teacher maybe, or someone like me stood here and we go, okay, well, this is true and this is right and this is the best way to live. And many of us know all about the way of wisdom. And we still ended up on the path of folly because we didn't apply that truth and wisdom to our life. And here's what happens. Rather than adjusting our life to the truth, we tried to adjust the truth to our life. The first step back on the path of wisdom is to say, you know what? I need something different. Like this right here is not working for me. And I recognize the path that I'm on, right, is leading me to places that I do not want to go. So I want to live in peace, right? I want to live free from harm for myself, for other people, and in my relationship with God. I want to live in wisdom. And the prayer today is the same as the prayer last week. Okay, God, help me to be wise. There are things I need to know and then give me the ability to apply it. Help me to be wise. So let's land here. I'm not even asking you to walk out of here today and correct every area of your life right now. That's unrealistic. But let's pick one. Okay, can you pick one area of your life? What is one thing in your life right now that probably you don't need to think about that much? You don't need to pray about it. You just go, okay, I know that can be better. Just one, that's it. One area where you go, okay, this probably isn't the wisest road to be traveling on, or I think God probably actually has something different in mind for me. And then what is the one step you can take in that direction? That's it. See, because in the same way that many of us are living out the consequences of decisions that we made days, weeks, months, and even years ago, you can live out the rewards of the decisions that we will make now in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead of us. And all you have to do is go, okay, well, what kind of life do I want? I mean, what do I want my life to look like tomorrow or next week or next month or 5, 10 years from now? Because if you can see a picture of what life could actually be like if I applied wisdom that led me to good and safe and peaceful and prosperous places, could I take one step in that direction? Okay, one step off of the path of folly and one step onto the path of wisdom. Because, right, I have wisdom when I both know what God's truth is and I'm applying it skillfully as I live in God's world. Let me pray for us. God, thanks so much today for these words from Proverbs. I pray that we have been true to what you intended. God, I pray that they have been helpful. And God, now we ask for your words to do a work in our life. God, I know that all of us throughout this room desire for things to be different and better. And God, I pray today that we would see the truth of your words and your wisdom and how it can lead us to the things that we want. So God, today we ask for wisdom. God, we ask you to make truth clear to us and then give us the courage, God, maybe do the hard work to make difficult, maybe decisions and apply that truth to our life. God, we ask for your wisdom today, and we're going to pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.